We are just waiting for Drew, so he's going to be here in a jiffy.
Hey, how's it going? I think I'm on.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Perfect. You guys appeared like a little ghost. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable. I'm your host, Millie Rouge, and we're here with our other host for today,
Marissa K.
Yes. And today we have our two guests on, Marc Ferreira and Drew from FKB. So thank you guys for being on and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So today's topic that we will be chatting about is songwriting. So it's a pretty broad topic, and I know it kind of seems like there could be so many things that we will talk about with this. But firstly, I'd like to go around and just do a little bit of an introduction for all of our guests. So they can kind of know a little bit more about your project, your music that you're working on currently, maybe whatever group you're associated with, whatever stage name you go by. So why don't we start with Marc to begin?
All right, so my name is Marc Ferreira. I'm a local artist here from Edmonton, Alberta, and I just love to write music. I love to play music. My favorite thing to do in the world. Currently, I'm working on my first EP. I've written about 6 songs for it. It's just the trouble is recording, as always. But other than that, that's kind of my current project that I'm working on now.
Awesome. Okay, and Drew, why don't you tell us a little about your project that you're with?
So hi, my name is Drew Shalka. I'm the lead vocalist of the band FKB. We're based here in Edmonton, and kind of our chief songwriter of the group, and I also about a year or 2 years ago now co-wrote the song Danger with Noella Charles, which was on her Juno nominated album Distant Danger.
Yes, which is so awesome. How long have you been a band with FKB for?
10 years.
10 years. Okay, wow, that's crazy. That's really awesome. I think you're like the longest band I've ever heard of sticking together, so that's very impressive.
We started in high school a very long time ago.
Okay, awesome. Super cool. So how did you guys meet as FKB? I know you said you started in high school, so I'm imagining something similar to that.
Yeah, so it's gone through a few lineup changes over the years, but the kind of myself and the drummer Derek, we both met. Actually, he was in middle school at the time, so we met doing some other shows around Bonnieville, some like recitals and just little things like that. And we formed and started playing, and kind of added people as we went along. And our other guitar player Travis, we also went to school with him, and I'd had previous bands with him in middle school. So he joined us when we were in college. And then our most recent addition, Alex, we knew him through some friends of friends, and he was at radio school. So we met him in Edmonton when we moved up here a few years back.
That's really awesome. And Marc, how long have you been playing for years-wise? How many years have you been songwriting / creating music?
I started playing piano when I was in elementary school.
Cool.
And I've been playing ever since. I'm mostly a cover artist. That's kind of where I have my roots. That's where it kind of all started. And then up until now, I have just recently, when I went to university, started writing my own music. And that's kind of where that journey started. So I'd say I've probably been writing for about 5 years now. Very
cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for kind of giving the audience a little bit more about you guys, so that they kind of have a background of where your songwriting experience comes from. And technically my other guest today is Marissa K, because I will be technically hosting these without her on the other videos. So Marissa, I'll actually get you to talk a little about your projects you've been working on, because this will kind of give our audience a background of everyone that's speaking, so they know who everyone is. So do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your journey, or even your projects that you're currently working on?
Projects I'm currently with. Well, let me think. So I go by the stage name Marissa K for my solo act. I started playing music back in 2012 because I went to MacEwan University for my music performance diploma specializing in voice, and then my music degree in performance specializing in voice. So I went to university for 5 years to learn how to play music and write music and perform and put together shows and record, arrange, do band rehearsals, all that jazz. And I wrote actually my first song for my songwriting class back in 2012. It was the first time I ever wrote a song. And yeah, I spent a lot of time, most of my songwriting was in school, and it was a lot of just like experimenting and just trying to figure out exactly how to put together a song, because I'd literally never done it before. And so with some direction from people like Alan Gilliland, Rhonda with no, I think that's how you say her name. I'm sorry, Rhonda. And just like a whole whack of other amazing instructors from McEwen, I was able to kind of start my songwriting journey, and got to the point where I wrote so many songs that I actually created an EP. Back in 2017, I released it called Postcards, and that's currently still on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, everywhere. And that was just kind of like a combination of the music that I had written throughout my music career thus far. So it was like the first 6 years of my music career. It was kind of one song from every era. And since then I've been writing a little bit more, but as you can see, my aspirations have gone to other places. So I'm currently in the band Vienna Whyte with Millie Rouge, and we actually started doing some songwriting with Vienna Whyte as well, but that's kind of on the DL right now. So
beautiful, thank you. So for those of you that may not know, I'm Millie Rouge, and like Marissa said, we're both a part of Vienna Whyte. So I want to talk a little bit more about your individual songwriting experiences for each of you today. So Marissa kind of dived in a little bit. But I wanted to start with Marc and your writing process. So just kind of take us through what your creative process is, take it through step by step, and kind of give us an insight of how you kind of start when you're feeling inspired to write a song or to start creating.
So I'd say probably the first thing that I do is come up with the melody right away. That's just something that kind of comes to me naturally. Like, for example, I'll be kind of wandering around or humming something, and then that's immediately when I start, okay, I got to play this so I can remember it, because I work a lot off memory. So that's part of where I find whether or not the song's going to be quote unquote good or memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Is if I remember that melody. So it all starts with that melody. Then it comes with kind of the chord progression. So you always have your simple chords, right? You know, your 1, 4, 5, 1. And then it kind of goes into like, okay, so how do I make those chords a little bit more interesting so that it's not just the same 4 chords? But the melody is really something that I find drives the creative process. And then the final step for me is really the lyrics. And that's where I struggle the most, is because writing the lyrics to something that you have in your head is kind of difficult for me to put into words what I'm actually trying to say with the song. So it's definitely an area I'm working on kind of as we speak. But for me, it's melody is the driving force behind anything I do.
That's really cool. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned sometimes it's hard to translate like your melody to your lyrics, because I find, kind of to relate this to something non-related to music, I find that's the same when you read a really good book and you hear that a movie's coming out and you're really, really excited about it, and then you go and watch the movie and it doesn't translate to kind of the book. So I imagine the book is like the melody and the movie is like your final lyrics and how it came out, and you're like, oh, well, that's not really what I was expecting. Like, I know I've written some songs where you kind of start off with this amazing melody or these amazing chord progressions, and then you kind of start to throw in some lyrics and some emotions, and you're like, okay, that was kind of not where I wanted it, you know? And then you're kind of like, scrap that, start again, right? So that's really cool that you mentioned that, actually. Drew, do you want to tell us kind of what your creative process is? I know you write with different people, so I imagine every time is not entirely the same. But can you kind of take us through a step-by-step of what you would do if you're writing on your own, or even if you're writing with someone else, kind of what your process would look like?
Yeah, so similar to what Marc was saying, I'm kind of a music first kind of type of person as well. I typically will jump in with some kind of melody, or maybe something on the guitar. I might have a chord progression or little riff, or on the piano I might have chord progression or something like that. But yeah, it does change every time. Like, a lot of times I try to have a title coming into it, so I'll have a running list of titles that I'll try and work from, or little ideas of things that I've seen in movies or things that I've noticed walking around. It's never, it is always a lot different. Sometimes we'll even, if I'm writing with people, if we're jumping right into a song, a lot of times what we'll do is have a reference song and maybe lock in a tempo from that, or try and take an element of that and see if we can get an idea going from that. That's not something that would be copying that song, but just kind of get some inspiration from it. It's all over the place, different every single time.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I've actually I wrote a tune with Drew a while back now, but it was very interesting because at the time I was writing with a few different artists just to kind of get an experience of what it's like to songwrite. And everyone has this different process, which I think is really fascinating. But yeah, when Drew said he pulled out his iPhone, and I was very surprised because he had all of these like subjects he wanted to talk about and all these titles. And I was like, I would never have thought of doing that. So I think it's really, really cool that you have that different process, and super cool. Marissa, do you want to tell us a little about your kind of songwriting process, maybe in the past of what you've done, or when you worked with other people, and just kind of give us a little intro into what you do when you songwrite?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny because I'm like a combination of Mark and Drew, where I'll either like think of a melody first or think of lyrics first. It's all relative, I guess. So like I have on my phone right now, I have like voice memo after voice memo of just like, here's an idea I had while driving home, and I'm like singing. You can hear like cars honking in the background. I'm just like singing. Or I'll have like a melody, or I'll even have just like a beat. It's like I have this one stamping combination from back when I was dancing, so I'm retired now. So, but I had this like stamping combination that we did in one of our dances that I gave my phone to my friend and I was like, can you record this? And I just like did the stamping combination. I haven't used it yet, but I was like, it's gonna be for something. I know that for sure. But for the most part, I usually tend to come up with my lyrics first, just because that kind of comes to me quicker. And for me, when I'm writing my lyrics, it actually dictates the way my music will sound. So I often write and get advice from, he's a composer musician, his name's Brett Sheehan, a fantastic guy. And he's often the person I turn to when I'm looking for advice about lyrics or melody, or just kind of like how the harmony fits in with the lyrics. And he and I both have the same problem where we tend to be too wordy in our music. So we try to challenge each other to say exactly what we want to say, but in a very, very few words, and then trying to use the harmony and the melody to complement the lyrics rather than have them be two separate things and trying to push them together. So that's one of the things that I've more and more been trying to do with my songwriting is be a little bit more complementary. And sometimes I'll just like kind of sit down on the piano and play a chord that sounds cool. I maybe won't have a name for it, even though I'll figure out the name after, but I'll just sit down and play a chord, close my eyes, play a chord, and then play another chord and figure out what sounds good after that. So I try to kind of keep myself out of the box of like what Mark was saying, like the 1, 4, 5, to try to kind of make it a little bit more exciting to listen to. So that's been a really fun way I like to songwrite, but I try to get really creative when I do it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself in the past when I have written songs, I technically, usually I'm sitting down by the piano. I know people use different instruments that they kind of prefer, but I'll usually typically sit at the piano and I'll start with just the chords. So whatever chords kind of resonate for that day or how I'm feeling in that moment. And actually from there, kind of like Marissa said, what I'll do is I'll take different chords and just kind of move to what feels right. So I'll just try, kind of like trial and error, just playing around with different chords and be like, okay, this doesn't feel right, or this feels like it's in the mood I'm trying to go for. And then from there, actually, usually the lyrics and melody will kind of come together cohesively, which has been a fun writing process. But what I kind of want to talk about is different maybe ways or different processes that you guys have tried that maybe was a little bit out of your comfort zone of how you normally write. So I actually want to start back with Marissa, and then we'll go Marissa, Mark, Drew, on maybe some different processes that you tried. Were they successful? Were they unsuccessful? Maybe ones that you would recommend. And we'll just start off with Marissa.
Well, you know what's funny, when you were literally just describing that was I don't know, Mark or Drew, if you watch Family Guy, but there's this one scene where Stewie Griffin has like a guitar and he's trying to like write a song with a guitar, and he's like, and then we go to the D chord. Oh, it's a little bit cloudy outside, and then we go back to the house, and it's like a major chord. I don't know if any of you guys watch Family Guy, but sometimes it's like that. Sometimes writing is like that. But I remember me and Millie were putting together a song for Vienna Whyte, where I actually took the David Bowie method, where you write down some lyrics and then you literally cut them out on sheets of paper, and then you just like move them around, and it changes the whole meaning of the phrase, which I found is really, really cool and really creative. And then you kind of have to decide what kind of rhyming scheme you want. And for me personally, I love trying to challenge myself with changing my rhyming scheme to not just be like A, B, A, B, or like A, B, B, A. I try to do like the inner rhymes, like kind of like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton, where he does like this rhyme here, and then he rhymes like 7 other like syllables with the same rhyme that he used in the top. And it's really cool. So that's something I try to do to challenge myself in songwriting. So
totally, that's really cool. I like that. Yeah, we tried that David Bowie method, and it was really cool because I myself have never tried that, but really fun to experiment with if you're kind of stuck, because I think in that moment we were both pretty stuck with the words we were trying to get out, but kind of moving it around really made a difference. So yeah, it was super cool. Mark, can you tell us about maybe some different experiences you've had with different processes or anything with the songwriting that you tried differently?
Sure. I would say that improv is probably my strongest area. And I tend to do that a lot, both on my own and with groups. But I find with groups, it's more beneficial because you kind of just gel together. So I was doing a small band kind of project with Francis, and it was actually quite a good experience because I kind of would just play some chords out, kind of lay out kind of how I'm feeling. And then, he's a stronger lyricist. So he would come in and start kind of jamming over that with his voice. And then you'd have the bass that'll come in and follow my notes. So it was nice to kind of like have like an unstructured way of being creative. And then I would probably say that my favorite method of songwriting is just sitting down at a piano and thinking about a mood, and then kind of translating that mood into your chording. Yeah.
That's really awesome. I like it. Are you talking about, what's Francis's last name? I'm trying to see if I know this. Okay, yes, I do know this person. Okay, he's super musical. Very cool.
Sorry, his last name is literally Bach?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's going to be a teacher, so they're going to call him Mr. Bach.
That's awesome.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I want my last name to be Bach. What the heck?
Does he spell
a little bit of
B-O-K though?
Yeah, B-O-K.
Okay.
On another side note, I also worked with a guy. His name's Ryan Gerba, and he's trying to be an MC, and he's actually a really good lyricist. We just have to kind of work together on like a lot of rhythmic things. But the way he writes is he will hear the kind of song or melody over and over again, and then he'll write a scheme on top of that, and then he'll say, okay, I want to change this scheme, and then he'll do that. So it's a little bit more of a lyrics focus, and that was out of my comfort zone for sure, and he took the lead on that. But he's a very good lyricist, so
that's really cool. Yeah, it's always fun being pushed out of your comfort zone. And I find for myself, when I do a lot of co-writes with other people, I am pushed out of my comfort zone completely, because especially if it's someone you've maybe talked to a few times in your life, or you just kind of met on Instagram and you're like, hey, I think it'd be really cool if we did a co-write together. And then you kind of just get smack dabbed with someone. You're like, okay, here's my process, here's your process. How are we going to make this work together? So I know when I first wrote with Marissa, we were going for a very specific vibe. We were going for this indie pop sound. And like Marissa said, she's very lyrical, and she likes to really extend what she's feeling. And I said, okay, well, that's awesome. And I really like that process for your music in itself, because Marissa does a lot of like individually like solo singer-songwriter. So that genre
style stuff.
Yeah, that genre does really well with more words to it. But I was like, okay, well, for writing pop, we kind of have to shorten it down, and we have to kind of, because a lot of pop songs that you hear on the radio, sometimes they have like 3 lines. Like if you think of the Justin Bieber song Yummy, there's really not much to it.
Yeah.
And I think if you did put more words in, people wouldn't like the song as much. They'd kind of be like, oh, this one doesn't like, I don't really like this one as much as his old ones, or I don't like this one compared to his song Baby. Like, anyways, that's it. All
when you think about it, they're basically the same song. Baby and Yummy are the exact same song.
Just no Ludacris in it, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay, and Drew, can you tell us about maybe some different processes you've tried, what was not working, what has worked, what pushed you out of your comfort zone, all that jazz?
I've definitely tried some crazy things over the years, like just, I'll read about what someone has been up to or someone has tried and it worked. And I found with the more out there writing processes, like the things that I think are going to be a secret formula, like a magic bullet to write the perfect song, they maybe work once, and then it's back to square one trying to find something new. But one really crazy one that I don't even know if I've used it successfully. I know I've done it. I can't peg a specific song that it's worked on, but it might have. I just forgot how I started the song. It's you put on 7 different songs at once overlapping. So like it's chaos. Like it just feels like chaos. And if you're wearing headphones, it's just like 7 songs in your head. But the goal with that is you sometimes will get interesting overlaps, and like especially if they're different genres. Like, if you put on like Jackson 5 against Eminem, you might get a melody that's just the 2 songs overlapping that you would never expect. But those kind of things I don't find work particularly well. I always find just, either getting into a room with people, drinking a bunch of coffee and just having some conversations and just start playing random stuff. I find that works the best, or just sitting by myself and throwing paint at the wall till something sticks. Like just sit and play and try and write as many different ideas as possible, and eventually one of them will be good.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
That's like a Jackson Pollock style of writing. I like it.
The throwing paint at the wall, or the 7 songs at once? Oh.
I'd say both. Both is like the throwing paint at the wall, but then like the listening to all the different songs. I'd say that's also like Jackson Pollock. I think that's really cool. I want to try that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Marissa, I was like, we got to try this. This sounds so crazy that I need to try it.
And then actually throw paint at the wall. We'll do it all.
Have you guys ever tried, I'm just out of curiosity, have you guys ever tried limiting like a certain time or allocating a certain time to your writing? Like, have you ever, I know with Marissa and I, we've done, they're mainly warm-ups, but we do like 2 minutes of writing, free writing. Have you guys ever tried anything similar to that with writing?
So like with sessions for sure, like a lot of co-writes I've had have time limits just because people have things they need to do after. So sometimes we'll be for a big song we'll be writing, it'll be like 2 hours max, sometimes even shorter. I know I've had a few where between like a few co-writers we'll have maybe half an hour to an hour if we're on Skype because someone's got a meeting right after. But I also, one thing I try and do is I try and get 5 different song ideas going every day. And as a result of that, it just automatically caps each one because you have to kind of move through it quickly. And with that, typically, like you have to kind of get an idea out of your head within 20 minutes if you're kind of running out of time in your day. So not like a specific time limit per song, but it does limit each bit of time you get to go through that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And how about you, Mark? When you've co-written with people, have you ever been kind of in a time crunch, or have you had multiple sessions? Kind of what's usually your experience with you've co-written or any songs you've written individually?
I tend to like to sit with the music a lot longer. So I don't really tend to allocate a lot of time to, the writing process per se. I like to like just kind of sit on the melodies and, talk it out, or just keep playing the melody and adding things into it until it sounds like it's going to stick. And I found that's for me personally. I found when co-writing with other groups, or even, with my buddy Ryan, I found that we kind of stuck to the same process where it's like we kind of keep playing the melody until it sticks, or he'll like come up with a line and then to that melody, and we'll say, okay, that didn't really work, so let's try a different one. Okay, too wordy there, let's try a different one. So we kind of just keep kind of throwing different ideas, and that's kind of how it's been. But that is an interesting idea because there are times when you just can't write anymore, where you're like, okay, I don't know what to say here, and I like this melody, but I don't know what to write here. So there have been times where I just kind of like been like, I have to step away from this song for today, and I'll come back and see how it is. But then I find that the best songs, at least that I've written, are the ones that I have sat with and played, and I've written them all in one sitting. I've done it all in a day and it sticks. And then, I go to sleep and I'm able to play it again and remember the lyrics off the top of my head. And that's kind of how I determine what. But I'm a memory worker, right? So a lot of my stuff is based on memory.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really awesome. I guess this kind of flows with what Marc was saying. What's your favorite song you guys have written so far? And why would you say it's your favorite song that you've written? Let's actually start this off with Marissa, and we'll kind of go again backwards to Drew.
I kind of have like two favorite songs I've written, but they're for different reasons. My first one that is like my absolute favorite song that I wrote it's called Matilda, and you know the song. But I made that song because I had this little thing in my head. I wanted to challenge myself to write a song with only 4 chords. So I came up with this little like bass line. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I came up with this little bass line, and it starts, the chord progression's like B, F sharp, E, F sharp. And so I just did this. And then I came up with a melody over top of it, and it just like ended up working really cool where the bass line did this and the melody did this. And it was like, so that's one of my favorite songs. Also is like the stupidestly cute song you'll ever hear in your life. It's really cheesy and really dumb, and I love it. And then my second favorite one is more of just like a personal one. That's more like lyrical content that I've written. I wrote it about a friend of mine who passed away back in November of 2017. It's called Red Boots and Ribbons. And that song, the reason why it sits kind of closer to my heart is because I wrote it about my friend, and it's also like deeply connected with my Ukrainian roots and my Ukrainian heritage, and how the two kind of intertwined. Because she was a girl in my dance group, so we have this really like special connection within that dance group. So kind of writing about all those things that are very significant to me, like the Ukrainian headpieces, the red boots that we wear, and then the colors that I associated with her. Just all those things just kind of really, really meant a lot to me. And I ended up playing it at our dance group's 30th anniversary gala event. And I just got like so much amazing feedback from that song, and it really touched a lot of people. So I think that's why it means a lot to me, but that's more just like a personal reason.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I have a quick question before we move on to Marc. When you wrote that song, was that did that help you through the process of grieving, or was that kind of a little bit afterwards that you sat down and wrote about it?
I actually, I started writing the lyrics like the day, or actually the night that I found out she passed away. They had kind of had an emergency meeting where they brought all of us together in this one room. Then they gave us the news, and then we sat down, had a couple drinks, talked about it, and kind of reminisced all together. And I was just really sad when I came home, and just kind of shell shocked because it was just very sudden. So I was like, I can't sleep. It's 3 a.m. So I'm just gonna sit down and write in my journal. And then I just wrote like paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. And then I left it for like 5 or 6 months. And then I finally came back to it, and I was like, I think I'm ready to write this song now. So I kind of had to grieve first before I was able to write the song, but playing it the first couple times was really difficult to get through it. But yeah, so in a way it did help with the grieving process. It kind of helped me, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't want to say solidify her memory, but it just kind of helped kind of keep her alive in at least my head. So
yeah. Totally. No, that definitely makes sense. That's really cool. I was just curious because I've never written a song like that. So I was wondering how that process kind of went for you, but that's really cool. And Mark, can you tell us about what your favorite song is that you've ever written and why?
Sure. So the thing, it's really hard for me to choose a favorite because they're all written about different things and kind of different points in my life. Like I've never done any type of succinct project, right? So everything is kind of at a different point in my life and about different things. But if I had to choose one, I would probably choose the one that I wrote for Taylor. Um, I was going through a really, really deep depression at the time. And so I wrote that song as a thank you to her for sticking through it with me, through everything, through my moods and, um, bouncing back and forth with that kind of thing. And I feel like it's the most technically complex song that I've written. So the song's called Someone as Sad as Me. And I also feel like lyrically, it's probably the closest to sometimes how I feel. Um, and I'm just really grateful for her. And, being together for 6 years, finally writing a song for her felt really good because, I've never, I always know like you don't write just songs for girls and, things like that because, you don't know if they're going to stick around.
Yeah.
But that was a kind of a big moment in my life and, realizing that like this one's here to stay and she stuck with me through the worst of it. And so that's why that one's my favorite, just because it has the most personal meaning to me.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that you mentioned that because I found that process too. Like I rarely write about, I think I just like to be dramatic most of the time. I like to pretend like my life is so much more dramatic than it is. But I find it so hard to write happy songs and I'm like, it shouldn't be this difficult, but I think it's just, even with like people you love, like I know I took a couple years to write a song too, because it's just like, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I can't even explain it, but I don't know. I know
it feels
Drew.
cheesy is what it feels like.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So writing something about that didn't feel that way was a big step for me. So and that's how I knew that it was kind of the right time and the right mood to go for. And
Right.
yeah, and I like that I didn't really write it. I wrote it about her kind of sticking with me, but it was about me still. It was still about a personal feelings I had towards something. It wasn't just about, oh, this girl's so beautiful, this is, and like cheesy, but it was something that still had that deep personal meaning. So.
Yeah, totally. And I know, Drew, you've been in a longer term relationship.
Yeah.
Do you find the same way, or are you kind of the opposite way where you can write more songs from that experience from your relationship?
I don't know. I typically, I don't really, I just kind of write songs as they come. I don't really have specific, I'm not writing for anybody in particular at any given time. I just find that kind of limits me to my own, what's going on in my life. And I don't know, like, I just find it's easier to pull from everybody and everything and things that I've seen, not necessarily things that I've lived.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. What would you say your favorite song that you've written so far is?
I would say my band's newest one, Glow, is my favorite that I've done.
I love that song.
Me
I love
too.
that song.
It's my favorite song ever. It's like
Thank
always
you.
playing on my Spotify playlist, and I'm like,
Oh, so that was you.
yeah, that is me. I'm that person.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's just I always find whatever kind of the newest one I'm working on is my favorite in any given time, and that's there's two that we worked on at the same time, and those were the two that got the furthest, and it was so much fun to write. And just from the beginning, like the very first demo I made of it, the initial idea, it just felt different than other things I was writing, and I write a lot of different songs at any given time. So when I have one that is like that and it just gives me that feeling right away, I know that that's the one I need to spend all the time working on. So when we got together with Dan Davidson and Clayton Bellamy to finish it up, and every time we would meet, it would go to that next level. So the first demo was already better than the other demos at the time. But then meeting with the two of them, and it suddenly was just completely different and way better than it was. And then we met again and it was even better. And every time the song just kept leveling up. And because of the way we wrote it, it was interesting because we would look back on it and we kind of put it together in pieces. So the chords were not played at the same time as the bass line. The bass line was added after the chords. So what was kind of neat about it was that the melody, the chords, the bass line, they were in different keys, like going back and like trying to learn it in piano later to play it. And I'm realizing this song, it just kind of came out of nowhere, that it was kind of more complex than we'd thought. And like the chords are in different keys from the bass line, and the melody really would be more natural to play in a different key on the chords, but the chords we used were way different, a different key altogether. And it was just kind of neat the way it pieced together, but it wouldn't have come naturally to just pick up a guitar and play and write that song. It had to come the way it came in pieces.
Yeah, totally. No, I totally agree with that. I'm going to kind of go this way now, Drew to Marissa. And I know, Drew, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but do you typically write from your perspective alone, or do you like to write from other people's perspective? I know some people like to write in the eyes of like their friend, or maybe an imaginary love that they've never had or something like that. Do you typically write from your own perspective, or do you like to kind of tap into other people's perspectives? So we'll start with Drew and then we'll go back.
It depends on the type of song I'm writing. I do like to pull from other people's perspectives. I find it more interesting. One thing that is like the life of the band on the road is a lot more boring than people think. Like it's a lot of gas stations, hotels, and hanging out at the venue until 4 a.m. to take your gear out. Like there's not that much experience that I think is worthy of writing of really from a lot of that stuff. So I try and pull from maybe things I've seen people do at some of the shows, or stories I've heard from people, not so much the things that I've done.
Right. No, that's cool. That's awesome. Mark, how about you? Do you typically like to write from your own perspective, or do you like to tap into others' perspectives?
A lot of the stuff that I write is, mostly from my perspective. And it's all based on feelings more than it is about, it's more about personal connection. But I would like to branch out and, write from other people's perspectives, but I just sometimes find it hard to put myself into that situation and feel kind of what that person would be feeling. Mm-hmm. So especially just because I'm kind of just starting out, I've mostly focused on writing about myself and about how I'm feeling, and at what stage of my life am I feeling this. And yeah, but it really just depends. I wrote a song recently called Sniper's Nest, and it's about a soldier in the war. And so it's in some level, on some way, it kind of reflects like how I feel inside in a way. But the story itself is from the point of view of a soldier. So, I mean, I can write from other perspectives, but it always somehow has a link to me. So
totally. No, I think that's really cool, because I think even if you do write from someone else's experience, like let's say you're writing from the experience of a drug dealer, for example, and maybe you've never dealt drugs before. I mean, that would be difficult to write about, but if you kind of put your own emotions into how you think this person would feel, or kind of an experience, related to that, it could be easier for sure. And now, Marissa, I'm curious to see, do you typically write from your own perspective, or do you like to dive into other people's perspectives?
I'm similar to Mark in that way, where I typically write from my own perspective, but I've been really, really trying to branch out and kind of take more of Drew's approach to songwriting, just because I found that sometimes when I'm writing about myself, I feel like I'm getting too real sometimes, and so I have a whole bunch of songs that I haven't released or even shown to people, because I'm like, this is like, playing this song for people feels like I'm standing naked in a crowd, so you're not going to hear this song yet. But I, similar to what I was talking about before, where we do those 2-minute writing sessions, where basically I just like sit down and then pick an item in the room and then just like free write about it. And I do this a lot with my students when they're kind of stuck on songwriting, so I try to help them through that, because we only have half an hour to work on it. So it's kind of a fun exercise. So I found that recently I did this with one of my students where I had a lamp in my room that was similar to like this one back here. And I just decided to just start writing about it. And then I kind of got this really cool idea that it wasn't about me at all. It was just like about light and the concept of light and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this could be a really cool song. Haven't done anything with it yet, but I've been really enjoying the process of trying to step out of my comfort zone. So
cool. I really like that. Okay, so we are going to talk about now some of our top favorite songwriters. So I'd kind of like you guys to go through maybe your top 2 or 3 if you can think of them, and maybe tell me and tell everybody, I guess, why they're kind of your top favorites. So let's actually go Marissa all the way back to Drew.
okay, well, clearly Sarah Bareilles is my first one. But I just like the way that she puts songs together. Specifically, all the piano-driven melodies really, really hit home for me because I mostly play piano. I just love the way she kind of puts together chord progressions. They just sound really cool and they complement her voice so well. My second favorite is Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's got to be. He wrote all of Hamilton, In the Heights. He's just fantastic. He wrote the soundtrack for Moana, and just his whole drive and how he puts together how he marries song lyrics and rhythm in the same kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but you just have to listen to his to his music to kind of understand. But he's a very gifted freestyle rapper. But he also is in musical theater, so it's interesting how those two kind of pair well together, which you don't typically think they would. And just the way he puts together all of these crazy rhyming schemes with all these crazy words that you're like, I didn't think those two would rhyme, but actually it works out really well. So yeah, he's really cool. And then my third favorite is actually Ryan Ross, who used to be in Panic at the Disco. He wrote pretty much a lot of the songs, at least I'm pretty sure. And he's just a fantastic lyricist. I love the way that he uses metaphors and just things that I don't normally think of, where I'll read one of his lyrics and I'm like, this reads like poetry. I don't know how you turn this into a song, but I was like, I could just read that as just a poem and it would be really beautiful. So yeah, his use of metaphors and symbolism, and it's just really beautiful and creates a lot of really fantastic imagery. So I'm a fan of all that.
Cool. I really like that. That's really cool. And Mark, who are some of your favorite songwriters, and maybe tell us what you like about their songwriting styles?
So for my favorite of all time, I think I'm gonna go with Phoebe Bridgers. She's pretty new, but I just love the way that she structures her songs in terms of how ethereal it sounds and how ghostly that she sounds, and the lyrics really reflect that. So her most popular song, Motion Sickness, let's take for example. The lyrics are, I have emotional motion sickness. Somebody roll the windows down, right? So it's clever, but it's also relatable in a way. And it's about having so many things thrown at you at once that you physically get sick because you have so many different emotions. And I just love the way that it's personal, but it's clever. It's still in a way it's kind of comforting. So I just like her warm kind of style. Then second, I'd go with probably Tyler Joseph from 21 Pilots. Just because his lyrics force you to listen in a way, regardless of whether, I know a lot of people complain I don't really like the tone of his voice when he raps. I don't like the change. But the lyrics themselves force you to listen and kind of take that into account of what is he saying? What is this kind of saying about something? And I really enjoy kind of deciphering that, especially their newest record, Trench. That's all kind of a concept album. And I really like kind of diving into all of the symbolism in there. So I really like that. And then I would go with probably Ed Sheeran, just because he's so versatile as an artist. And I think in terms of writing, the fact that live he'll create the track right in front of you kind of thing, just shows how good of of an artist and performer he actually is, that one person can really come up with like these hit after hit after hit, regardless of lyrical content.
I really like that. And I think what I like the most about Ed Sheeran is his ability to just co-write with any genre, any style, and somehow he still has his own flair. And you're like, yeah, that's Ed Sheeran in that song with this person. And it just flows so naturally. Like, I think that's really cool that he possesses that talent, because I don't think everyone can do that and pull it off. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Mark. Drew, who are some of your favorite songwriters and maybe why you like them the most?
So I'll put it into two categories, because I've got like my favorites of all time, then I've got like current ones, and I like them all for different reasons. And basically, the one thing they all have in common is I like people who can consistently create hits and innovative things time after time. So like my very favorite of all time is definitely Lennon McCartney. Like just the innovation and the ability to not only change the sounds of pop music, but to make it popular as they do it, and keep cranking out hit after hit and just staying on top of the charts while pushing the envelope. I love that they were able to do that. And in the same regard, Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, like arguably even more so than Lennon McCartney, he really pushed the envelope in pop music to the point where the Beach Boys fell out of pop music for a while because they were getting so innovative, really, in many ways. But like those two are my all-time favorite, or I guess three, because Lennon and McCartney, and Brian Wilson. And then modern ones, like Mark was saying, Ed Sheeran is just fantastic. But Bruno Mars, for similar reasons, I love how he's just been able to keep writing these hits. And even before he was an artist himself, he was a producer writing for people. He can play every instrument on those tracks. He like recently with Ed Sheeran and Chris Stapleton, like just coming out of nowhere, and suddenly all of them are charting on active rock radio, and none of them have been played on rock radio ever before in their lives. Like, I just love the versatility of him.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Like we were saying with Ed Sheeran, it's just, he's all over the map, but in the best way possible. So it's really cool.
Also similar to Mark Ronson too.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Mark, you go first.
I really appreciate just the versatility the most, I think. Like any artist and that's why I like 21 Pilots so much, is just because they are versatile regardless of how you feel about them. And yeah, and definitely I would like to also go back to what Drew said about, Lennon McCartney, and like always pushing the envelope. They're the great, like I felt the need not even to mention them just because they're so great, right? And I think that they're really important to mention, actually. So I appreciate getting some classics in.
Yeah, totally. And Marissa, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, in terms of versatility and just like being one of those people who's always on top of it. And Mark Ronson too is fantastic.
He is awesome. And he's really good with collaborating with different artists. And yeah, I think it's really cool. And this is kind of a weird honorable mention, but it's not necessarily that he does, I don't know if he does a lot of songwriting, but I really like, I listened to a bit of Drake, but I really like the concept that Drake does where he takes these very small named rappers and introduces them almost to the world just from these features and these collabs. And I don't know if he necessarily co-writes with a lot of these artists. I mean, maybe he does, but I really like that he kind of takes people that he finds super talented and kind of takes those beginner / more local, if you will, musicians, and really brings them up to be kind of who they are. I mean, I don't listen to a whole lot of Drake, but that's the really cool thing I like about Drake that he does, is that he kind of helps those little names get to where he is. And I know he probably, like, he started with TV and moved over to music and stuff, but I think that's really inspiring about him, and I think it's pretty cool.
Who was that one rapper? Because I remember reading this as an article like a while ago. There was one rapper that worked with Ozzy Osbourne, and then there's a whole bunch of people who were like, wow, I can't believe he's giving this guy Ozzy Osbourne a name. Like, I can't remember who that was though.
Oh, yeah.
Post Malone.
Post Malone, thank you.
Yeah, Post Malone.
That's too funny.
Oh man, but that whole album though is like insane. If you've ever listened to it, it's incredible.
Hollywood's Bleeding is pretty good. I like the opening tracks, and there are a couple songs in there that are just like real standout tracks that you wouldn't expect from an artist like Post Malone. But he's a versatile artist too.
Yeah, he's kind of in that same Ed Sheeran realm of he just really throws out songs that you're like, I didn't even know that could like come from you. But I know when I first looked at Post Malone, I think it was Chris that actually showed me a video of him from his high school band and the music he used to play. And I was just like, how did he get from there to this? But sometimes he'll still pull out that like super acoustic, like indie vibe. And I'm like, what? But it's really cool to see different sides of different artists, right? So yeah. Now this question is kind of similar to what we kind of went over, but I want you guys to just give me one choice, one person who inspires you the most. This could be not necessarily even about their songwriting, but this could be just based on the artist itself. Who inspires you the most in your music? If you can give me one, try your best to give me one person. That would be amazing. Let's start with Drew and work our way back.
That's a really difficult one because there's so many. I guess I'd have to go with, I think Bruno Mars, just fantastic live performer, fantastic songwriter, producer, a musician, like just all around. And you can tell he just works really, really hard. And from what I've heard from people, like not directly, obviously, but like like in interviews from people who've worked with him, that he's the hardest working guy in the business, and he just puts the effort in. And like he'll be in the studio till 6 a.m, making sure it's right. And then after he leaves, he'll sit in his driveway and listen to the mix and make sure that everything sounds right. And if it didn't, what can he fix about it? Like he spends a lot of time at it, and I really admire that.
Totally. Yeah. I actually agree with that because Bruno Mars is like, just hearing about his past, I'm like, he works so hard, and I know he hasn't really released as much as he did in the past few years, but I feel like he's deserved it because he probably works so goddamn hard. So, and I think Drew, when I think about you as an artist, I think that I can kind of see how he inspires you because of how hard you work and how hard your band is always pushing. So I think that's really cool to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And Mark, who inspires you? Who is kind of your, if you can give me just one, because making it just one is way more difficult. Who inspires you the most?
I'm going to say Weezer. In fact, I'm looking at a bunch of records right now that I have of Weezer. I grew up with them. You know, they've had their ups and downs, and, you know, they've been on an upswing recently, but I've been following them, you know, since I can remember. They're really my first experience with, you know, that type of music. And I think that their influence carries a lot in my music too. But yeah, I just respect them so much for even through like the lowest of the low, they still stay together. And yeah, there's been some lineup changes, but they're still together, like, you know, since 1994. And I just appreciate them so much for, you know, sticking with the community and being a part of their community, listening to the feedback, and releasing stuff that they want to release. You know, they don't really care what people have to say about it, and I admire that.
Yeah, they've been alive since I've been born, so that's very impressive. I was born in '94, so that's very impressive. Marissa, can you tell us who your number one? I mean, I feel like I probably know already, but who's your number one inspiration? Who inspires you?
I'm not gonna say that person because I know you know exactly who I'm gonna say. And yeah, while that would be true, if I had to think about every aspect of like their career, I'd have to say Lin-Manuel Miranda, for similar reasons to Drew, where you know talking about Bruno Mars and how hard he works. Lin-Manuel Miranda is very much the same. Like he busts his butt working on stuff. One of my favorite stories from him that I heard, where he was doing an interview at a high school, and he was talking about coming up with these songs that he was going to be putting into this musical. And he said he was on the A train in New York, and he's just got this idea in his head and he started writing it down. And then he got to his friend's birthday party and then walked in, shook his hand, was like, "Hey man, happy birthday. I gotta go." And then he kept writing the song on the way back. He's like, "Cause I couldn't lose that idea." And so, and like, you know, just the amount that he works and he spends so much time on his songs, like he will scrap an entire song if it doesn't feel right, even if it's like his favorite song, he'll scrap it. And I admire that dedication and that sacrifice. So yeah, he's he's just an incredible songwriter and an incredible just human being in general. So
yeah, that's really cool. All right, so we've got about one more question until we wrap up here, guys. And our last little question is about a little bit more about the writing process to kind of end it off. So we're just going to be talking about rhyming schemes. So do you guys think that you have to rhyme in order for it to be a song? So let's start this off with Marissa, and we'll work our way back. So what do you think about rhyme schemes?
it's tough for me to say because I go between both. But with, I don't know, I could honestly go either way. Cause like when I think of non-rhyming schemes of songs that I love, I think of like Joni Mitchell, and she's incredible, known for her songwriting, and not a ton of her songs rhyme, and that's fine. Cause her lyrics read more like poetry than anything. I don't know. I'm half and half.
A little bit of both. Okay, 50%
Yeah.
on both. No, that's all good. Mark, what do you feel about rhyme scheming or song structures? What do you think is kind of your preferred route, or what do you think works best for you maybe?
I think that when I write, I do tend to like kind of make sure it kind of rhymes, but I think that that is just a kind of beginner stage. You know, I'm early on in writing, and I don't have a lot of experience with writing, right? So I feel like sometimes it's actually more advanced and more meaningful when you don't rhyme, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there needs to be some sort of cohesive kind of scheme in general. So like in a verse, like you should maybe have like an A, B, A, but you know, there's no shame in ending it with a C or a D, or you know, or like not having it rhyme. So there's a mix somewhere between having both, and I don't think that every song has to rhyme to be a song.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of famous songs that literally have like no rhyming in them. So,
Yeah.
Drew, I'm curious to know about, with your co-writing experience and writing experience, what you think about kind of song structures or rhyme schemes.
I don't think it has to rhyme. Like, I think just whatever works best for the song and feels most natural. Like, a lot of times, actually, what I'll do in my co-writes and what my co-writers will do will be an idea that starts with kind of just a regular, normal rhyme scheme where it rhymes all the time. We'll take the rhymes out of the verses or something like that, and we'll try and remove them altogether. Or a lot of those songs I've been starting recently have no rhymes whatsoever, and I try and do that intentionally, just to kind of throw people for a loop. I say that as like pretty much everything I've released recently has had very like standard rhyme schemes, but I don't think they have to if it doesn't work.
Yeah, totally. And I think it can be dependent on genre too. Because I know not every genre has that rhyming feel. Like I think in pop, absolutely, that's more of like a standard thing to really rhyme your A, Bs and A, Bs. But I think if it's like a different genre, like I don't listen to a lot of metal, but I don't know. I know they're probably a little bit poetic, but I don't know if any of you guys listen to metal more frequently than I do, but maybe that would be a comparison compared to pop, right? For example, that maybe has that more bubbly pop rhyming, super fun Meghan Trainor vibe.
I like that idea of actually like intentionally taking out the rhymes. I think that's really interesting. Just being like, oh, you thought this was gonna rhyme? Nope. I like that.
Yeah, keeps your audience piqued in interest for sure. All right, guys. So that is actually all the time we have for today. I want to thank you guys so much, Drew, Mark, and even Marissa, for joining us on the show today. My name is Millie Rouge, and I'm a part of Vienna Whyte as well as Marissa. So this is our kind of new segment called the Vienna Whyte Roundtable. So this is kind of like our pilot episode. So I really appreciate that you guys took the time out of your day and kind of short notice to come on. So for those of you watching at home or watching through whatever format you're watching through, make sure you're liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell button so that you're notified when our shows come out. We are going to be releasing basically this roundtable for Vienna Whyte Monday to Friday. So make sure you are following to stay kind of updated on the new episodes coming out. So again, thank you all for coming. I'll let you guys all say bye and sign off, and then we're off for our days.
Thank you so much for having us.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate you guys doing this. It does mean a lot because, you know, sitting at home with the family just outside the door is kind of a little bit boring. So I really do appreciate you putting the spotlight on some local musicians here. So
Absolutely.
I think that's amazing. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys. Have a great day, guys.
You
Yeah,
too.
you too.